Hi everybody, and welcome to an online session which will talk you through how to answer a 15-mark exam question. You can hopefully see this question, which is evaluate policies the government could use to increase the UK's productivity. Now, when it asks for policies, it clearly needs more than one. So on these types of questions, what we'd look to do is to include two evaluated policies. So what we need to make sure we do is we talk about how these policies can improve productivity within the UK economy. So the answer would need clear reference to the UK economy to achieve top marks for application. So what my advice would be on a question like this is that we should be looking to include 5 different paragraphs. So paragraph 1 would be an introduction to what productivity is. We might briefly explain what policies would improve productivity. We would then talk through policy 1, which would be in paragraph 2. Paragraph 3 would be an evaluation of this policy. And then what I would, if I show you quickly, I would then look at policy 2, which would be paragraph 4. And then finally, the evaluation of that policy would be the final paragraph. The clear things to point out to you here is that what we would need to do is to evaluate 2 different policies. We need that clear reference and links to the UK, and each policy needs that clear link back to how it would increase productivity. What I've not done is to make any kind of overall conclusion. The only question where we would do something like that would be on 25-mark exam questions. Okay, so what I'm looking for are really detailed chains of analysis, explaining how these policies would improve productivity in the UK. But then within the evaluations, I would then need, again, clear and effective chains of analysis to support those evaluative statements that I'm making. Okay, so let me talk you through the first 3 paragraphs of my answer. So we're going to get off, first of all, what we actually mean by productivity. So productivity is a measure of the output per worker. So it's therefore a measurement of the efficiency. I'm just going to include a really basic link to the UK economy now. I'm going to talk about the fact that the UK has got a productivity gap. So when you compare productivity in the UK with other G7 nations, this could be America, it could be France, it could be Germany, the output per worker in Britain is less than what it is in those other economies. And then what we should be happy with, what that will then do is to lower our international competitiveness because it raises unit labour costs of production, and that can then impact negatively on trade performance. I'll briefly mention the policies. So the policies that we would use to improve productivity would be supply side policies, and these could be either interventionist or free market policies. So that first paragraph, everyone, should not really be any more than 3 sentences or so. I am literally setting the scene. At the most I've got there, possibly 3 marks. I've got some knowledge, a little bit of application, and I've introduced the policies. Right, in the next paragraph then, I'm going to say that my first policy would be to improve human capital. So this would be a policy designed to upgrade the quality and efficiency of labour in our economy. Right, now below that policy, you can see how I would introduce that policy. So I'm going to talk about this would require increased government spending to increase the provision of apprenticeship programmes and skill development in areas where the UK has skill gaps and labour shortages. So what I could do, I could link this to the fact that the UK has got a deficit in trading goods performance. So this could be targeting improving productivity in UK manufacturing industries. And the idea would be that this would tackle skill gaps and labour shortages. So what I'm doing here is I'm pinpointing the policy on the area of the UK economy where we struggle when it comes to international competitiveness. It's about upgrading skills of workers in manufacturing industries. Now, what I've then put below that are key words that I would include in this paragraph. So I'm going to talk about the fact that this is an interventionist supply side policy. If I upgrade the skills of workers, then this could tackle occupational immobility of labour. If people have got more skills, more flexibility, they can use their labour in more different industries, more different professions, and that could improve access for businesses to access the skilled workers they need to become more productive. You tend to find as well that if workers have got better skills, then they can use capital more efficiently inside factories, on production lines. And clearly I'm going to link this back to manufacturing, which is where the UK has got these productivity gaps. I then mentioned this link back. I've got to make sure that I steer this back towards how this could increase the UK's productivity. What I've got to be really, really careful of here, though, is that I don't start diverging or digressing away from the question. It's really easy here to start talking about how this could then improve economic growth, how it could lead to improved government finances, better economic development. All those points might happen, but it's not relevant for this question. I've got to focus on the question requirements. I've literally got to talk about how policies can improve UK productivity. So let me give you this policy, what I could say for it then. I could say that human capital development could be an effective policy to improve UK productivity. I could then say that in manufacturing, the UK lacks international competitiveness. So if I was to increase government spending to improve access for young people to get hold of apprenticeship programs, then this would allow these workers to access better training and education, which would therefore upgrade the skills of these workers. This interventionist supply side policy would therefore allow these workers to be able to use capital on production lines more effectively, which would therefore allow them to become more productive, which means the output per worker in UK manufacturing will clearly increase. I've then given you some possible evaluation points for this policy. So I've put down, we could talk about the cost of the government. So we could talk about how this policy might conflict with other key macroeconomic objectives. And again, we've got a clear reference here to the UK economy. What we know is that UK national debt is now in excess of 100% of GDP. So increasing government spending to improve access to apprenticeship programs, well, this could clearly further increase national debt problems in the UK. I could also get a fact that these policies tend to be long-term in nature. So they might tackle productivity gaps, but it's only going to be a long-term fix for the economy. And that is because the nature of education and training is that people need time to gain those skills, but then they need time to put those skills into practice to become more productive in UK manufacturing. So it will not fix productivity problems in the short run, but it will hopefully have a long-term benefit for the economy. Now, the next one I've put down is risk of future structural unemployment if the UK lacks comparative advantage in manufacturing industries. What we know is based on trade theory is that in many manufacturing industries, the UK doesn't have comparative advantage. So lots of these different industries where we're upgrading skills in manufacturing, the UK might be viewing as a declining industry anyway. And what you could argue is giving people skills in these areas might just mean that these people are specialising in industries that the UK is moving away from. And if that's the case, that could lead to future problems when it comes to occupational immobility of labour. So everyone, now let me give you a couple of good paragraphs here which will clearly pick up the top marks for knowledge application analysis and evaluation, because I wouldn't need to include all these different evaluation points. So I could say policy one could be human capital development. This is an interventionist supply side policy which could require the government to increase government spending to increase access to apprenticeship programs and education programs to raise skills in areas where the UK has got skill gaps and labour shortages. This could be in manufacturing where the UK has a productivity gap. I can then say if workers are given better access to skill developments, then it means that when they get jobs, they can use capital more efficiently on production lines. This would therefore raise the ability for people to work inside factories and increase the output per worker, and therefore mean that people become more productive. But then the evaluation could be, well, overall, the problem is this policy is long-term in nature. The nature of human capital development is that people need time to acquire new skills. This therefore means the benefit to UK manufacturing is more of a long-term benefit rather than a short-term benefit for the economy. Right, then I've got to evaluate policy 2. So what I'm going to go for this time for my second policy is to reduce tax rates. And I could reference reductions in income tax rates or corporate tax rates. I could even briefly mention both of them. Now think about how this one will work. This time what we've got is a market-orientated supply-side policy. The government are reducing their interventions within the workings of the free market economy. So we're going to subject more of the economy to market forces free from intervention. Now, if we were to reduce corporate tax rates, this should hopefully incentivise an increase in enterprise in the economy. What we're saying to businesses is that if you base production in the UK or set up new businesses in the UK economy, then you are allowed to keep a bigger chunk of your profits. So the idea is if firms have now got lower costs of production, it becomes more profitable to produce output in the economy. Well, if you've got more firms operating in the UK, that could increase competition. And what competition will do, it will incentivise firms to upgrade capital, because to compete with rival firms, they've now got to become more efficient. And if they're upgrading capital and infrastructure, well, that would mean that workers in those factories have now got better machinery, better capital, better infrastructure to work with, which should hopefully increase people's ability to increase their output per worker. So you've got that clear link back to how it would increase productivity. I could go down the line that it might incentivise more foreign direct investment. So if foreign firms can base production in the UK but pay lower corporate tax rates, then it will incentivise more firms to relocate production to the UK. And again, this could be, targeting manufacturing industries, car manufacturers, etc. Now, what you tend to find is that when big firms come to the economy, they'll be investing into capital, they'll be investing into infrastructure, but what they will also bring with them might be expertise, better ways of producing output that our economy isn't aware of. And if this happens again, this will mean that the workers inside these factories will be able to become more productive because they can utilise this better capital, but also utilise these new skills and ideas that have been imported from overseas. Now, I could go down the line of reducing income tax rates. Now, the idea is if people, when they go to work, have got lower income tax rates to pay, then we're allowing workers to keep a bigger proportion of their income. And what this might incentivise is for more people to supply their labour across the economy. Well, that will make labour markets more competitive, which means that firms have got a better access to workers. And that will hopefully allow them to access better skilled workers as well. And then I've got to make sure I link this back to productivity. If firms have got a bigger pool of workers to recruit, they can hopefully find better skilled workers. That might again tackle labour shortages, skill gaps. They can find people that can better use capital, which again will make them more productive. I could even go down the line that reducing income tax rates might incentivise more high-skilled workers from overseas to come base their, to come work in the UK economy. And if that can bring in, people with better skills, more skills, different skills, again, it allows these people to be more productive in UK businesses. Now, if I was evaluating this policy, I've got two possible arguments here that you could talk about. I could talk about the tax reductions, how this might conflict with budget deficit reductions. I could talk about how through COVID-19, the UK economy's had to build up huge increase in budget deficits to get the economy through the worst of COVID-19, and how going forward the affordability of tax cuts might be quite difficult for UK national finances. It could make reducing budget deficits more difficult. It could mean there's got to be more public sector pay freezes to pay for this. It could mean there's going to be cuts to budgets for education and maybe even healthcare. So I could talk about the opportunity cost of this policy, how that could be quite bad for economic development. I could even go down the line that this policy is potentially politically quite sensitive. Giving businesses tax cuts and high-income people tax cuts could lead to growing relative poverty in the UK economy. Now, if we're giving tax cuts to the biggest businesses, the richest people, those with the most wealth, high-income earners, then this will create a bigger gap between the rich and the poor in society, which at the moment, when you've got millions of people having to resort to using food banks, it might be seen as a not very popular policy. Now, what I could do to back up this argument, I could draw a Lorenz curve and show that Lorenz curve I've put here shifting inwards, but it should be shifting outwards. So an outward shift in the Lorenz curve could show that growth in inequality given by reducing tax rates to potentially high-income earners and big businesses across our economy. So everyone, just to sort of wrap up this then, we would evaluate two policies. So we would kick off first of all though with a definition of productivity. We would then maybe briefly mention that supply side policies are used to improve productivity. Policy one, I went for human capital development. I had a clear chain of analysis, links to the UK economy, but then I linked it back to how it would increase productivity. I would evaluate it with one of these different arguments, and the one that I would personally go for is that these policies are long-term in nature. But then I would need that detailed chain of analysis to explain that point that I'm making there. Policy two, I went for reducing corporate and income tax rates. Again, I had a detailed chain of analysis, how it could tackle productivity gaps in the UK. I then had a clear link back to how it would increase productivity. And then the evaluation, the one that I would go for, would be the politically sensitive one. You know, when you've got growing poverty problems in the economy, giving tax breaks to, rich businesses, potentially high-income individuals is quite insensitive. And it could also conflict with attempts to reduce inequality gaps. And I could draw that Lorenz curve shifting outwards to demonstrate that increase in poverty that might happen due to these tax reductions. So guys, that is how I would tackle that 15-mark question. There isn't an overall judgment in sight. I've evaluated two policies, I've applied it to the UK economy. So I'm pretty confident if I wrote down my answer as I've explained it, it would comfortably score 15 out of 15. Thank you very much.